Now that when I onboard new vendors, it's always with an ROI, and I've gotten guarantees of it. They say, I promise XYZ, and if not, you don't pay. If you really truly believe this is going to do that, then commit to that promise.
Yeah.
And of course, not all vendors are going to do that, but that's also a very fast way for founders to say yes.
Hi, I'm Maria Meadows, the CEO of RevEdge, and today's revenue brief is meeting with Susan Blinn at Tinyhood. Thank you for meeting with us today, Susan.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So Tinyhood, I'm excited to learn more about you as the founder of Tinyhood, but just for our audience, Tinyhood is the leading on-demand parenting education platform. So think masterclass, but for specifically for new and expecting parents and all parents across all life stages. So I think you have built an amazing platform, close to over 1 million
Thank you.
users and a 5-star review on the Apple Store. So it's just amazing what you've built. And I'm excited to pick your brain today on how you have built your business on the B2B, B2C side, but then also transitioned a new channel on the B2B side of things too. So particularly how you have done so and how you have thought about revenue as a key growth channel for your organization. So before I dive into my questions, would love to hear a little bit about you and kind of how your role has evolved at Tinyhood and your background.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Maria. So I'm Susan, the founder and CTO of Tinyhood, and I'm also the president. So Becky and I kind of co-CEO a lot of the aspects of the company. My background, as well as Becky's, is actually in technology. So I grew up as a coder, programmer, and when I started Tinyhood, that was my main role, was just to build the product. And of course, as you grow a startup, you start putting on a bunch of different hats. So I put on my finance hat, I put on the product hat, I put on the marketing hat, and I've kind of had to adjust to the needs of the business. My style is a little bit more in the weeds. So instead of just hiring somebody, I like to kind of learn the demographic, the area that I'm going to be focusing on before I bring on a team. Yeah.
I think that's actually brilliant, and is a nod to your leadership style. And I think any good founder and leader just really needs to understand. I just think it'll just better position you to enable the organization. Is that how you would describe your leadership style, or what if someone were to describe you on your team? What do you think they would say?
That's a great question. I guess it would be like the technical term of like authoritative a bit. I don't love that. I'm eternally optimistic, but I think if you were to ask everyone on the team, I'm quite in the weeds a lot of the time in the beginning because I'm mostly just very curious. I
Yeah,
love to learn new things, so I would say probably authoritative.
I love that. And then Tinyhood's not your first company, right? You
So it's
have,
not
yeah,
Tinyhood's the first company that I've founded, but
okay.
I've worked at previous companies, previous startups.
Okay. So throughout your career, how have you viewed the role of sales in the early stages of
It's
growth?
so interesting because sales was probably the last piece of Tinyhood that was kind of put on. And I would say the least familiar I was with it. And I would say for the big most of Tinyhood, we never had a sales representation. And I think I never really understood, for a direct-to-consumer company at least, the role of sales. But in hindsight now, I realize how critical it was. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we should have done this so long ago.
How, in hindsight, right? So it's good, but how has your view of sales changed as your business has grown? And then
Absolutely.
also, how do you decide what resources that you needed on the sales side?
Absolutely. So when we started moving into exploring the B2B space, selling to enterprises, actually the previous startup I was at had quite a large sales force because we were selling to enterprises at the time. But again, I was on the technology team, product team, so kind of siphoned away. They were also in the New York building. I was in Boston. So I kind of never really saw that side of the house. And the way that I always thought about sales, like when I first started Tinyhood, was, this is for selling to enterprises, and also, you don't really need a sales team until kind of you're further along. So the when we started exploring B2B, where we looked at a classic salesperson who happened to be in the area that we were looking to sell to, and I didn't realize there are so many different types of sales leadership, sales colleagues, and I think in hindsight I would have thought a little bit more carefully about the different types of sales that you could have on the team. And I think we might have brought on the wrong team for the stage that we were at.
That's such a great point. And it's something that we advise founders on all the time too, is just thinking about what type of talent and skill set do you need at which stage. And I think there's different sales leaders and sales executives that are better suited for different stages of the business. So can you dig into that a little bit more? So when you think about the resource that you hired, what would have been an ideal hire resource in hindsight for the early stages?
Absolutely. So given the background of both Becky and I in the product world, I think we would have much would have benefited from somebody who was more of a strategic leader in the sales space versus a traditional salesperson. Because we just didn't have that background. Of course, we like researched, did everything we could, but we, by trade, we're not salespeople. So in hindsight, we really needed somebody who was more strategic, who could help define processes, help kind of explain how a sales organization should be built from the ground up and where you should start. And what we had hired was a traditional salesperson who was phenomenal, who expected us to have a product that was defined, a process that was defined. We didn't even have somebody at that time when we hired them to kind of do the lead gen. There's just things that we were missing that I think we need a little bit more guidance on.
Yeah, that is such a great point too, because I think you have some really good talent that can walk in the door and just fall victim to bad processes or just
Yeah.
undefined processes. And I don't think that's anyone's fault other than it's just who's the right talent for the right stage. And it's something to think about too on from a sales talent perspective of, what their skill set is, but what tools and asset and support do they need to be successful. And we see a lot of turnover in the early stages
Yeah.
just for that very reason. We don't know yet, right? So we think about the type of talent that needs to come in. It's got to be a little bit more fluid in terms of
Hmm.
and strategic to your point, but not. It's a balance, right? So I always use the word scrappy and resourceful, and someone that. And I think it's a question that I hear often, and we think about for any startup is how much do they need a process? How much do they need experience in the space? And how much do they need to be really great sales and closers? And
Absolutely.
it's kind of a blend of all of it, right? But
Yeah.
you may get a really great closer that needs defined collateral and a clear go-to-market.
And we did not have that, not even
Well,
close.
it
And it's funny
evolves.
because I feel a lot of founders feel this way about tech and like hiring a tech. But Becky and I are like, I could hire tech people. Like, I understand the timelines, I understand the process. That is like, I can do it in my sleep. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, no matter how many advisors we talk to about sales, if you've not done it yourself, it's really difficult to get the hiring correct, I would say.
Well, and it's also interesting in your dynamic because you started on the B2C side and you built a
Mhm.
sizable model on the B2C side, and then now you're launching a whole new channel on the B2B side, right? So uh, it doesn't transition apples to apples.
No, not even close.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of aspects do. The technology is almost the
yeah,
same,
right.
but everything from the support, the process, the go-to-market strat, it is completely different. And even the expectations, I can turn on a campaign on the direct to consumer and immediately I'm seeing revenue come in. I think it was shocking for me that sales cycles are just so long in the enterprise, but it makes sense when in hindsight. So we really didn't give, I would say, the sales team that we had brought on enough credit. We didn't understand. We just wanted immediate results. And I think the lack of understanding of what a sales cycle looks like really hindered us. So,
That is such a great point that I just want to take a minute on because it tends to happen often where numbers are built and they're given to the board. And there's sometimes and oftentimes a misalignment between the sales cycle and then the forecast.
mm,
So I do feel, and I have the privilege of working with you too, that you are very analytical and you do take the time to understand, which I think helps. And it helps ground the business and it helps set the business up for success and find ways to give the space for different channels to be successful. Can you spend some time talking through what metrics you focus on, kind of how you oriented yourself to the B2B space, just to make sure you're managing your advisors and your board's expectations appropriately, and also setting the sales team up for success and giving them the tools they need to be successful?
absolutely. And just to give a little background of where we started with the direct to consumer, we really were focused on an ROI play based on the amount of marketing dollars we spent, the amount of employees we were paying to kind of run those marketing efforts. And again, I could see that ROI daily, weekly, monthly, immediately. And I think when we had our first sales organization, we realized that that's not how it was. Working with your team, I knew that we needed to hire a leader who could kind of explain what's the sales cycles, what's the ROI, and how is the ROI going to come to fruition. So for me, I still look at the ROI, but it's a little bit more delayed, I would say. And also more in general, understanding some channels in sales have a longer sales cycle, some have more, some start slow and then they like stumble. So just kind of thinking of it as a long-term ROI play. I'm willing to invest this much money to explore this channel. And to be honest, putting money aside where that channel may not work, but I want to make sure that we've given it all before we decide it's not going to work. So the main drivers for me are obviously profitability. So at the stage of a company we are, profitability is key. So in lieu of longer sales cycles, I'm always thinking about, okay, what else can we do in another channel that could
Yeah.
provide supplemental income to keep us at a profitable state of a company?
I also want to focus on that. So while ROI is the North Star, we know that, right? That's just for any business. I think you've taken it a couple levels deeper in terms of what are the leading metrics that I need to focus on as a
Oh,
founder
absolutely.
to know that the business is moving in the right direction, right? Because you don't want to call it too soon and pivot too soon where you haven't given enough chance, but you
Right.
also don't want to keep running and
Exactly.
have an emotional bias toward a channel that may not be working. So can you spend some time talking through we know the top layer metrics that we're all aligned to as founders and CEOs, but the one or two numbers underneath that you're like, this is what I'm asking for the sales organization to communicate to me on a monthly and quarterly basis to know that there is a there for this particular ICP and go to market.
Absolutely. And I will say this is something that your team has really helped me learn more about. I think the things that I've pushed on in our relationship was really just more of these milestones, and not necessarily revenue milestones, but what are the leading indicators as you
Yeah.
describe through each phase of the cycle, based on a conversion rate. So how are we, let's say the first few funnels have certain conversion rates, like how are we doing compared to those? And being able to understand those checkpoints so we'll know by Q2 whether this particular part of the funnel is working. And
Yes.
that to me, and I know it's also tricky for a sales organization to be able to promise certain
Yeah.
milestones when it's a new product offering, we don't know, but it's really helpful for me to have a benchmark of where I can just take a deep breath and say, okay, I know the
Yes.
revenue's not here, but I can see there's specific milestones like meetings booked interest, different things that we've defined as various benchmarks have been helpful to be able to say, okay, we're on track this quarter, despite potentially like not
Yeah.
having revenue cash in bank.
Yeah. Where it's a luxury working with you as a founder, with your background too, is that yes, you may not come from the sales background, but you really push the sales organization to put some goals in place that are underneath a number. And I think it's hard because you don't know, you're
Yeah,
making assumptions and you're having to pivot, but you've created a safe space for the business to just anchor to those metrics and have an open and honest discussion on, are we there or are we not? Is it too
right.
soon to call it or not? And so it does take a particular level of talent that is okay in this unknown. I mean, and focus on some of these leading indicators that I think helps you be more predictive and proactive about setting everyone up for success in the business. So it doesn't feel like a failure, right? Because when you're testing new verticals and new customer profiles, right? So to your point, and I don't want to lose that on the audience, Tinyhood is not new. It is
Mhm.
a proven product that has an amazing amount of engagement and impact for working parents across all life stages, right? It's the fact that now you are looking to diversify your revenue and expand to other channels that you've never tested before. And so that for every channel, there's a very different sales process, go to market messaging. And I think it's very easy for anyone to put numbers on the board and say, this is what our goals are. But where you've put a lot of time is, okay, what are these leading milestones and numbers in terms of meetings completed, from meetings completed to opportunities converted, and how do we define each of those? So you've
Right.
pushed the business to put a lot of definition behind each of the stages in the trigger, so everyone's aligned to say, okay,
Absolutely.
we all know that when an opportunity moves from this stage to the next stage, this is how we're defining it. These
Right.
things have happened. And so it kind of keeps everyone aligned, but it also creates a safe space
Absolutely.
for everyone to say, is it working or is it not? And I think that's a lot of empowerment to the business and organization that sometimes you don't see. Sometimes you see some founders just treating sales like a distribution channel
Right.
number.
No, I mean, to me, sales is like our number one
Yeah.
for right now. It's happening. I will say that, we've made mistakes where we've kind of kept sales in a black box where we've been told, okay, it'll take 12 months. And it's kind of like, let me do my thing. Goodbye.
Yeah.
And at the end of the 12 months, what's going on? And again, it's not, the milestones are not meant to micromanage. It's meant for understanding for myself because I would like to learn all along the way. And I actually don't see it as a failure if we decide, 9 months into the third milestone, it's not working. To
Yeah.
me, that's a success. We've successfully figured out that this is no longer going to be a priority. We're going to move here. What the mistakes that we've made in the past is where it's kind of fuzzy, where we're not really sure one way or the other. To me, it's like, let's just put these milestones in place so that we can learn whether this is moving forward in the
Yeah.
right direction or not.
And then what tools do you have, sales tools that you're using currently?
So currently we're using HubSpot, which
Yeah.
I absolutely love. And I will say we've used HubSpot for 3 years now. And until your team came in and set it up the correct way, I would say I didn't realize how powerful it was. And I think
It's a great
that's
tool.
probably most technology vendors out there. If your products can be quite powerful if used appropriately. And so
Absolutely.
I would say that's another mistake that we made is we were not using HubSpot with the previous sales or in the way that I felt like was understandable to me. There was no dashboards. I couldn't see what's going on.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about dashboards because you are so metrics oriented? You do have your own Excels and systems. So you're tracking in a couple different places.
Yeah.
If you could change the way you were receiving information or getting information, if in your seat with everything that you oversee and your background, what would be a couple metrics that you would like or prefer to get that you're not getting now or in a format that you're not getting now?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I love Excel sheets, as you know by now. I think HubSpot is amazing in what it does. What I think it might be missing, or maybe we're just not using it because I haven't asked to use it in this way. I think I would more, we have like these quarterly milestones. I would love to be on a weekly where I'm really getting it. But at the same time, maybe that would be just too much. I guess that would be the only ask would be like, is there even like something more granular than the quarterly that we could use as a
Yeah.
base? And I think you and your team are using that. It's not necessarily privy to me, I guess I would say.
Yeah. It's not always coming up to the
Right.
CEO. So what would you want to see then?
That's a good question. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
And
I think right now we see like the monthly breakdown of all the things in
you
number,
get
like
the
the
outcomes,
meetings. I get
right?
the monthly.
And you get a
Um,
forecast, like an updated, like, are we going
yeah.
to hit or are we not? Yeah.
And then maybe I don't need to see anything, but I guess being like a data person, I would love to see weekly over time just to see how we're trending. But I will say when we meet every week, you kind of provide that insight anyways. It's just for me being able to like read it and see as a historic.
It's interesting because so the weeklies change depending on what's on everyone's mind or on deck for the week, right? So you think
Yeah.
about a cadence with a sales organization. You've got your weekly meetings, you've got,
Yeah.
a monthly summary to some extent, but for the most part, depending on the channel, a quarterly deep dive or a business review, which is really a look back. And so those weeklies can dig into pipeline. Sometimes they're account focused, right? So this is where it's like how it's hard to balance all the different topic areas that with limited time from a
Yeah.
CEO standpoint,
It's
right?
almost, yeah, totally.
So to your point, like sales, we're in it every day. We know, and right, but you're running and wearing multiple hats across the
Yeah.
organization. So you get, let's say, an hour with the sales team a week to check in,
Mhm.
and it and this is for any sales organization, especially one of your size too, candidly, but across any organization. Some weeks it's a big account that we're either
Mhm.
prepping for or debriefing on and need to talk about next steps. That's going to have a huge impact. Some weeks it's going through the whole pipeline and process.
Yeah.
Some weeks it's going through sales tools and here's what we would like to have.
Mhm.
So taking all that into account, right? You got deal updates sometimes, you've got pipeline updates on a weekly cadence, right? If you had to like say, this is where I would want to get involved in a perfect scenario, once we've proven the channel out and we're kind of humming, this is where these are the most important parts of the business that I want to make sure I'm looped in on without replacing a sales leader or
Mhm.
because reality is there's a reason it's two different jobs.
Yeah.
So like, no, you can't be in everything and it's just not realistic or practical, but you do need to be involved to an extent where your brain is invaluable to the sales organizations. You know the product deeper than anyone else. You help unlock opportunities, even from a pricing standpoint. And I can speak to that personally with you. So taking all this into account, taking a step back, what would be the most important updates? Are we pacing to the metrics we
Right.
said, like, is that would be the most important to you?
Yeah, I think it would be any metric. So like let's use the meetings book. That's a simple
Yeah.
milestone, right? We're hoping to get 42. Let's say we get half. Anything that I potentially could apply more resources on to help resolve. I would want to be alert. And I think you guys did alert me, by the way. I would want to be, this week, all of a sudden, it's like we're feeling like, we have 1 month left in the quarter. We feel like we're kind of low. What could we do? And that being a
Yeah.
flag, like, hey, I think we're about to that week. Like, how about you try to like get your marketing team to help us? And like, by
Yeah.
the way, you've done all this. I'm just giving examples
No,
of
but it's a
if it
great
were to be
point.
automated, it would be like
Yeah.
that week would be yellow, and it would be we could use some help from the rest of the team to kind of or we may decide, you know what, it's okay. We're actually now focused on something else, which is what we did, partners. So let's not worry about the fact that we've had to readjust that number.
Yeah, look, the beauty in this interview is that you kind of got a CRO brain and a CEO brain sitting here,
Mhm.
right? In terms of how we've operated together. And
Yeah.
so what I think is important is that while we all intimately understand and we know that we're communicating, it's almost kind of like a flag. Like it's, yes, we got that Tuesday meeting. There's 15
Yeah.
other things, right? And so I think it's a very valid point to be like, it's not that the sales team is not reporting on something or not flagging issues. It's almost this proactive kind of update that better positions you to solution in your own time versus waiting to do it live in a Tuesday meeting or follow up afterwards. I think it's a very valid point.
And
And
I think you've done this already. It's just more if you're talking about wanting to document that
yeah,
somehow, automate it. I
yeah.
don't know how you would do that, but that would be the automation flag of like, hey, looking like we're trending. Do we want to keep this way and keep our priorities, or do we want to stop it? Again, you've done that manually
Yeah,
with
no,
me. So
and it's also, I mean, candidly, it's why we're building RevEdge. I mean, it's exactly what this platform is meant to do
yeah.
because we've worn the different hats and we see that even your best teams that have the best communication and the best collaboration, it still is everyone is, there's only 40 hours in a work week.
Yeah.
And so like your head's down
Yeah.
executing, you're pulling your head up, you're working on strategy, you're back down. And so if
Yeah.
there's this like intelligence layer, which is what RevEdge is, that's supposed to connect all the dots,
That's
I
great.
think that's where the biggest discrepancy has been, even for metrics oriented leaders like yourself. It's doesn't mean you can't get to it, but it takes
Hmm.
time to not
Yeah.
only pull it, but think about it
Yeah.
and then activate on it. Now I want to go back to looking back. You've launched 2 different channels, which are very hard. And I can speak firsthand, and we're not there yet, but you have proven out, and there's a lot of really great signals that you do have a successful B2B channel too, in addition to B2C. That is not an easy thing to do for a founder to run 2 totally different
Yeah, it
go to
feels like
market.
it's two. Yeah, it feels like it's two different businesses, but
It
it's
is 2 different
yeah,
businesses and with a very lean team. So as
yeah.
you think about the future of sales, how are you thinking about resourcing or tooling? And what mistakes are you going to avoid that you've kind of made in the past?
I think we need to have leadership full time on the team that is focused on sales. Again, I learn a lot from you. I see a lot, but I think my whole career has been technology. Like I can't imagine not having that background information of just like, so I think
Yep.
what we'd like to do is really kind of find that leader that's in-house that can just be my counterpart from technology standpoint to the sales to kind of make sure, because I don't foresee sales slowing down. If anything, that's basically our highest growth area is going to be in these sales growth
So
channels.
we get a lot of questions when scaling up. Do you start with a sales leader? Do you start with a senior account executive? Do you start with a sales development representative?
Yeah.
Where do you start? Because you, just for the benefit of the group, you've hired a consulting firm to help, which is the Resonance Agency, to help kind
Yeah.
of prove out a model. And then you're planning to bring it in-house, right? So you're trying to de-risk as much of the segment as possible. But the ultimate goal is you're going to bring in your own team. But a question we get often from the consulting side is, where do you start, right? Because if you need to continue the momentum with revenue, you bring in a sales leader. Is it a sales leader that's also carrying a bag?
Mhm.
Or is it a sales leader that's helping build out a team? How are you thinking about? And there's no
Absolutely.
wrong answer. I'm just curious
Yeah.
how you're thinking about it.
And I think working with you and your team has, again, brightened my eyes to all the different types of sales
Yeah.
professionals there are out there.
Yeah.
I think if in a perfect world, it would all depend on the fractional help that we have. So, in my opinion, you are that fractional executive leadership.
Yep.
And I think if we were ever to wind you up, I would need that leader to be
Yep.
someone just like you. And I think it all depends on, I know we're coming up with a plan. I think it's really dependent on how I teeter off fractional help or
Yes.
not. So,
Yep.
in my opinion, it seems to make sense to maybe not hire that top sales executive first and instead work with you to kind of help us train the other sales team and then eventually find that top down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard because you've taken an approach where it's a fractional resource that's going to help build a process and prove out that process, which then does, in theory, make it easy for a senior account executive to come in and have a playbook.
Yes.
And then the whole business is trained and familiar on execution, right? But if you're a founder that may be starting from scratch and even just moving away from founder-led sales, there's a question, do I start with a sales leader to help define it, or how do we define that process? I will tell you, it's expensive to hire a senior account, a sales leader. At the same time, while a senior account executive may feel on the ground tactical, it can be expensive based on a long ramp time, right? Delayed revenue and them just trying to figure out a process. So it's kind of like a chicken or an egg for the business. And I don't think there's one right answer depending on where you're at. But I do, and I think you and I are cut from the same cloth that way. I think having a process and a clear understanding is one of the most important things to do. But I don't see that with every founder. I think some founders are focused more on let's close a big whale and then figure it out from there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we have dabbled in different channels, and I think for me, I'm also trying to optimize for learnings now so that when we do come time to hire, like it's in the right area of I know most sales executives can kind of handle areas, but the healthcare world is so much different than the employer world. So trying to figure out as much as we can learn ahead of time to help us perfect that hire, I would say is my goal.
Okay, so I'm mindful of time, but I have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
You were even doing research in this channel before you even reached out to the Resonance Agency and Dave Kerrigan at Benefit Pitch Rate. You have built a network. So can you walk us through a little bit about if you were to give advice to a founder who is thinking about launching a new revenue channel?
Yes.
What do they need to do before they even think about resourcing?
Absolutely. The first thing I would say is, so the only reason we moved into B2B, to be honest, was because we saw that there was a real gap in getting access, this education access to all parents, because 40% of parents are on Medicaid. So we already knew in the back of our mind. So understanding why you're thinking about potentially going to BD is like step one. What's the reason? What are you trying to
what problem are we
achieve? It's not
solving?
just money, right? Oh, what's next for money? It's like, what problem are we trying to solve
I
for
love that
the
point.
business? Then we had a lot of indicators where we were having inbounds to us. We had a couple of large health plans reach out to us, a couple of health systems saying, hey, we'd love to offer this education for free to our patients. And so then we had a little bit of validation there and we executed those. I think the mistake that we made, to be honest, before we went dive into to hire our first sales teams, we didn't really look at the total addressable market we kind of just followed the inbounds, which again is not a terrible situation, but I would have looked at the total addressable market. And so we did that for the employer space before. And to be honest, one of our investors advisors has been telling us to go after the employer space for years. But yeah, I would make sure to understand the total addressable market and the timeline. So the sales timeline. So are you looking at 18-month cycles? Are you looking at 9-month cycles? And then how do you, if you're just B2B, you have to understand where are you going to have revenue to fund the business while you wait through that. So for us, we had our direct to consumer business and our sponsorships sales to help us fund the business. But again, planning the total addressable market, how long until, and then what is the size of the first contract? So in healthcare, typically they're like pilots, they're smaller. I mean, it's not a small amount of money, but it's a little bit smaller money, then you get a little bit more here. So then when we plan for employer, it's like, okay, we understand the total addressable market here. We understand how big this can get and how fast and how it can snowball. Just planning those things ahead of time. And again, not to micromanage the plan. It's better to just move forward. But I think when you're dealing with long sales cycles, you want to be really thoughtful about which channels you go after. Because if you go through all of them at once, you're just going to fail at all of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I can speak to this because even when we were connected, and we typically do this anyways, but I think you helped us take this to the next level of thinking through, even in the proposal, like scoping stage of deciding to work together, of like, let's put some assumptions in around conversion ratios, like,
Yeah.
right. And we've evolved it, but we still
Yep.
reference it. Like, how right were we? Were we off here, or
Yeah.
are we over indexing in this area? So even being okay putting pen to paper and saying,
Yeah.
these
A
are my
hypothesis. Yeah.
assumptions on the funnel conversion,
Yeah.
and we can recalibrate from there. But then I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
And you had us work it a couple times, even on a conservative standpoint, because it's very easy emotionally to be like an
Yes. Oh, it's
ego.
going to be
We're going
great.
to close this and it's going to be right.
Yes. And I would recommend,
Um,
if you're a founder who does not have a sales background, to not attempt to do that on your own. I
right.
really think you need to have people who are in that specific channel
Yeah.
industry,
Good
what
point.
their assumptions are, because it's helpful. And you can always get more conservative or more aggressive depending on how you feel. But to ask someone who's in healthcare sales to decide what the funnel should be for employee, it would just be, it's not a great idea.
Yeah. Well, and everyone brings such a different perspective, right? I'll give a shout out to Dave Kerrigan at Benefit Pitch. I mean, he knows the space so well, so he kind of helps
Yeah,
think about it from a strategic go-to-market standpoint. And then you
absolutely.
tapped into sales resources to be like, now walk me through conversion.
Yeah,
How many phone calls do you think it's going to take? How many
right.
meetings? And again, there's a lot of generalized information out in the market. So like you can get to this information, be like, okay, baseline, what does it look like? But then where it needs to evolve is, what are our actuals? Like, every
Yeah,
business is dynamic, every channel is dynamic, and you have a couple different
yeah,
plays in motion, right? So it's looking at it combined separately. And I think
right.
that drives the conversation from a strategic standpoint for the business. And it's not just about
Yeah,
deal level conversations with sales. It's, yes, that's important too. And there is a lot of conversation there, but it's also at the same
right.
time like the funnel at each stage and how do we unpack it?
Yeah, and also just to realize it's really, sales is just one part of it.
That's true.
Like we've had to evolve our product messaging, or even the product itself. It's going to be evolving. So based on everything that we learned, so just being basically very flexible as you journey down B2B, that it's not going to be the same. I mean, it seems like the product's the same, but there's just the messaging is going to adapt. Everything's going to
That's true.
need to adapt. So being able to do that as well.
That's a great point. Okay, so there is a lot, selfishly, I want to ask you this question. There's a lot of AI capabilities coming to the market, a lot of RevOps tools, and you're in the seat of running the organization. So I'd be curious, just how many outreaches do you get of different tools being pitched
Oh,
to you? How do you make the decision on which ones are valuable for you?
it's a great question. I must get 100 vendor emails a day. So,
Mm.
which is why sometimes I lose my emails from you all. But to be honest, we're being at this company, we're being departmental at this point. So right now we focus on the engineering department. Our next department is marketing. So it'll be
Yeah,
departmental. And then once we're in that department, when I see vendor emails that reflect that, I will pursue them and look into them. But for me, if I'm seeing something related to support, I'm not looking at it today. I'm like, I can't address that today because each piece is. So I think when you mentioned this new product, I got really
yeah,
excited
RevEdge.
because I
Yeah.
mean, I just also know that any product you recommend is going to
Well,
be
thanks.
top notch. I'm excited.
No, I think, I mean, look, we've been in this seat for so long that even your most analytical CROs and your process driven CROs still have limited bandwidth, and right. So this connective tool between the executive team to better enable the organization, I think, is a win-win for everyone. So how do you decide what tools you need then? Even on, let's just talk engineering, because sales, you'll ask your sales partners, you may ask your marketing team, but do you
Yeah.
tend to flex more in the space that you're comfortable with and vet tooling there, or do you try to?
Oh no, no. Given how I'm really in everything, I see a lot of the pain points across
Yeah,
all the business. So I'm running the finances, the marketing. I see it all. To me, it's been capabilities of the tooling out there. The engineering aspect of AI is just, to me, way beyond all the other departments. So that's kind of where we've leaned in on. I also think about the roadmap and the pipeline of what the company needs to do, and I see the upcoming bottlenecks. So I'm trying to not overscale at this point, but just to prepare for um, what's going to be needed in the next 3 to 6 months.
okay.
Yeah.
And then what's your take on the AI messaging for every tool? How
What do you
much?
mean by AI? What do you mean by that?
There's a lot of bloat, in my opinion, in the market, and a lot of folks claiming there's a scramble to make every tool and every workflow AI driven. And so how do you vet how much is marketing messaging versus
Oh, you know
Oh,
me,
some
I'm always
people
an
miss it.
ROI. Now that when I onboard new vendors, it's always with an ROI, and I've gotten guarantees of it. They say, I promise XYZ, and if not, you don't pay. So that's been kind of where I've put
That's
my foot
smart.
down with vendors. If you really truly believe this is going to do that, then commit to that promise.
Yeah.
And of course, not all vendors are going to do that, but that's also a very fast way for founders to say yes. It's like, okay, why not? If
What's
it's,
the impact to my business? It's also a best practice for selling is like think
yeah,
about it in terms of the joint business case and
yeah,
outcomes that you're going to drive
right.
versus like the features and benefits of your tool, right? Align it to that
Absolutely.
organization. Smart of you that you're probably just helping a lot of people become better
Yeah,
founders and CEOs just with that
yeah,
question alone. It's like you really need to think about how does this
yeah,
apply to Tinyhood?
right. Awesome.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
Am mindful that what now I've kept you over an hour,
No,
but
it's fine.
I selfishly like I've had the privilege of working with you. I think you're an amazing founder and CEO. I'm so excited
Thank
to see what
you.
Tinyhood's going to do, and what you've built is definitely just very aspirational for any founder building a business to be like, wow. And to now be in a position where you're launching different channels is huge in how you're thinking about it. So I definitely encourage, if you're open to it, anyone reaching out to you to learn a little bit more, pick your brain on
Absolutely. It's
um,
been fun.
your
I
own
love this.
thinking. But I love working with you, Susan, and thank you so much for taking
Likewise.
the time to answer these questions for us.
Well, thank you, Maria. Talk
I'll talk to you
soon.
soon. Bye.
Okay. Bye.